It's 2:15, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So, wow. Oh my goodness.
So, welcome everyone to Eerie Travels Top Florida Haunts. So, thank you for being here.
And greetings, travelers. That's how we usually
Greetings, travelers. That's what we do.
Our wonderful snowball Mike didn't get any of that, but it's awesome because it's unidirectional. Okay. Oh, wow.
We have a producer.
That's right.
Introduce yourself.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'm Mark Muncy. I am the author of the Eerie Florida book series. I've also done the new book, Eerie Appalachia, because I run out of adjectives pretty quick. But you probably know me from either The Curse of Robert the Doll on Travel Channel, or about a minute and a half with an Ancient Aliens in season 3. But, and then my wonderful co-host.
I am Erika. I'm a horror author, and also I run Forward Publications. But I talked Mark after many years of knowing him into doing a podcast with me. So we started Eerie Travels about a year ago. We do 2 episodes a week, so we are super happy, and we give you all cool places to go and visit, or if you're like me and don't like being scared by ghosts, to wait on the outside of it. So it's good. It's good. And send your friends in, because I have a philosophy that I just don't have to outrun my friends, just the other people on this podcast.
Yeah. And then our wonderful producer, Bo Lake, is here. Bo, what do you write as well? So horror romance.
Yes.
So, the spicy stuff, gang. The spicy stuff. So, but today we are here to talk ghosts, and we don't have a whole lot of time to do it. So we figured we'd whittle it down to a top 5 of the most haunted locations in Florida. Now, we did this last year and at Megacon, and another full room. Was anybody here for that last year? A few of it? Okay. We've revised the list because things have changed.
Yes.
It's some things are still as haunted as they were, not taking anything away from the ones that made the list last year, but there's been recent developments that we thought warranted a revisit of this topic.
Yes.
So
I do need to ask, how many of you believe in ghosts?
Ooh, good.
I like that. I like that there's a huge section on this side that's like.
Yeah, no, and then it's kind of nice, but that.
But do you believe in Bigfoot? So.
No, it's funny, we do these, and it's like, we go to the Bigfoot conferences, and they will talk to you all day long about Bigfoot, and then we go, well, what about this ghost over here? And they'll be like, nope, don't believe in that. And then we'll go to the UFO conferences, and they won't talk to anybody. No, we're not, because we're going to get flashy things when we walk out of here. But the ghost people will talk about anything to everybody, so that's why we love them. So.
Okay, so where are we starting? We're starting number 5.
Number 5. Let's jump right in. So this one is a little famous if you're into this stuff, if you're into hauntings, because it almost killed a person who was investigating it. Okay? So we're going to go over to the east coast of Florida. And we are going to a place now where it now sits. It wasn't where it originally was. It's been moved. And it is called the Riddle House.
Yeah.
Anybody know the Riddle House? A few people? All right. So have you been there? No? Okay. So it's...
Very safe decision. Very safe.
Yes, I have.
Okay, continue.
All right. So the Riddle House is in a place called Yesteryear Village. And that's where they basically, whenever an old house is about to be torn down, and somebody says, oh wait, that's kind of an important historical building, and since Florida, if it's not going to be a condo or not going to be a new Buc-ee's, then we move it to a place somewhere else. And so there's this South Florida Fairgrounds has an area that's Yesteryear Village. There's over the Tampa Fairgrounds has one too, Pioneer Village there. But they moved this house. Now what the Riddle House was a mortician's house. It was not the funeral home. It was just where he lived. It was the city's place where they put the mortician. And Eventually, though, he did open shop there because they closed the city's funeral home. So he had to actually open up shop in this place. Now, there's a lot of ghost stories because it's a funeral home, always, that's a ghost story. But one of the funeral directors did was he went up to the top floor of his house, went up to the attic in his house, and decided to unalive himself because he was just very depressed. And he's a funeral undertaker in the 60s, not the best time to be one. So that's the main death we know of in the house.
Other than all the bodies that were in it.
Yeah, but we think there may have been others because now that they've done research on the house, after it was moved, because they were going to tear it down, and they're like, oh, this is an old Victorian, let's save it, we'll put it in yesteryear village. And they move it there, and as they did that, they noticed some things in the basement. They found bodies, not many basements in Florida, especially not in South Florida. So they did find bodies that were not accounted for on the cemetery records. Now, the reason this house becomes famous is in the 1970s, after it's moved, people come to investigate it because they're hearing weird noises in the place at night. It's closed off, but yet we're hearing noises. So a camera crew comes in and goes up to the attic and are filming it. And as the cameraman comes down, something grabs his shirt and it doesn't come down. And all the people are like, hey, where's Charlie? Where's Charlie? And then they're like, well, he was just with us in the attic. So they run up to the attic and he's almost strangled to death in this attic by a strange little line that had appeared from nowhere. They could not find it after he got cut loose. But the picture shows a clear, like, fishing line wrapped around his neck. And now that house has been investigated numerous times, and you can go investigate it yourself. The team down there that runs it is a place called War Party Paranormal. And what's cool about them is they allow other people to join their team for investigations, which is pretty cool. Now, sadly, they lost one of their founding members just recently, a few weeks ago. Her name was Scotty Scotty Burns. We love her to death, and sad that she's gone. But they're doing a wake for her this coming Friday at the Riddle House because she was a docent there, and she was one of the things, the reason they had the Riddle House. And so they're going to do a seance for her in the Riddle House, and it's open to the public. So if you want something fun next week, Fort Lauderdale.
But we're going to go to a house that may or may not have many unsolved murders, and we're going to do a seance, which always sounds like a terribly great idea, doesn't it? Let's just open a gateway. That sounds fabulous.
That's what it's all
They're
for.
like, we hope Scotty will come through and not everything else that's living in the house. But it should, if you do enjoy ghost hunts and you do enjoy those kind of things, it's an absolutely great place and a fun time. And it's a piece of Florida history.
There are other houses in yesteryear villages that are also haunted, but that's probably the big one. So if we're doing a top 5, we have to go that.
Top
Almost
5.
killed a person. Come on, that puts you in the top. So that's where we set the bar. Are you ready to go beyond this? Are we still here? All right, that's what we want to hear.
Okay, so what is number 4?
Number 4 is one that is a repeat from last year's top 5, but it has shifted a little bit because things have kind of calmed down there a little bit. It was a little higher on the list, but it is still ultra spooky, and it is one of our favorite places to visit, and that is the May Stringer House in Brooksville, Florida. Anybody been there? Okay, a few. All right, those in the know, right? So May Stringer is numerous deaths occurred in this house. It was a small little 2-room house. The May family, and then Virginia May and her husband owned it. He went off to the Civil War. He did not come back, so she had to remarry. So Virginia May remarried Doc Stringer, and Doc Stringer liked the land, liked the house, and he's like, we're going to add on to this. So he turned it from this little 2-room thing into a big 6-room Victorian, 3 stories high, and added an attic, and he added his operating room in the front room. Now this is right in the heart of Brooksville, so maybe an hour from here, an hour and a half. And we know a few patients didn't make it there. We also know he had some slaves and that they were buried on the property as well.
And they used to bury families on the property too, so there is a graveyard on the property.
But the odd thing about the graveyard is, we don't know where it is. We have the tombstones because they found them in a thrift store in town, and somebody had been selling them as paving stones. So we don't know where the graveyard is on the property. So they've set it up like a little graveyard right next to the house, but that's not where the bodies are. The most famous ghost there is little Jessie May. She's up on the 2nd floor. She's a child, died 2 years old, and her spirit is the one paranormal investigators pay through the nose to come investigate this house, because she will play with your toys. If you bring them, she will give you evidence you wouldn't believe for those. Right across the hall from her brother James, he went to World War I. When he came home, the girl he wanted to marry had married someone else. So he went upstairs and unalived himself in the attic area. And then what's happened is it's now the Hernando County Historical Society. So they've added it as a museum. And they get all these props and property, and people bring them stuff. So they've got military wing, they've got a medical wing for Doc Stringer stuff. But up in the attic, they have an actor's trunk, like an old vaudeville traveling trunk. And there is something attached to this trunk. And this is another one paranormal investigators love to get in the attic of this place. And there's a ghost attached to it, and he's earned himself a nickname.
Yes, yes.
And you know it's bad when you earn a nickname in Florida. So, this ghost, the psychics say his name's either Gary or Gus, some with a G. There's no history of this trunk, so we can't really place who this guy owned it was. But he's very mean, and he pushes people, especially ladies. He'll pull your hair, and he'll also, on those spirit boxes and everything, he swears like a sailor. So he has earned the nickname Mr. Nasty.
They're not really clever nicknames.
No, it's
They're
Florida.
nicknames, but they're not clever nicknames.
It's Florida. What do you expect? So we're not the most creative people. We have a town on a gulf that's a port. We call it Gulfport.
But the Mayshire House, another place, part of the reason we call ourselves Eerie Travels, you can travel to it. They have haunted tours. You can go do tours. If you have a paranormal team, you can contact them and go see it. It is, I've been inside this house, unfortunately. It is very, very creepy at times. And it does highlight one of the things I like to say, which is, if you believe in spirits and stuff like that, I don't think spirits have an age, have a gender, have an anything, but there's obviously a cosplay ghost that's playing as a 2-year-old kid playing with toys, so that's there. And then there's Mr. Nasty, and there's some great videotape. Mark was there with Tampa J and Chris the girl, and they're recording from 2 different angles. And they went in, they had shut the door, you could see it sealed. Mark's trying to tell them about it, and something like opens the door like, get out.
Yeah,
So,
we were
luckily
shown
they
the door
left.
by Mr. Nasty.
Yes.
Tampa J, Chris the Girl, great YouTubers, and if you haven't watched them, they do some amazing places too. So that was cool. That one's actually going to be on Paranormal Caught on Tape next season, hopefully. Fingers crossed. If they do another season. So,
Yes.
But
Okay, so what's number 3?
so that's number 4.
No, 4, yeah. So
Yes.
what's
Now we're
number
moving on to number 3. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this one is, well, how to describe this one? It is a unique location. It is in the wonderful town of Bartow, Florida. How many people know Bartow? Right? There's a few. They have a great science fiction convention there every year. The whole town turns into Megacon called Sci-Fi Bartow, and that's in a couple weeks. It's actually Valentine's weekend, I think. A lot of fun. But there is a location there. This crazy man decided to build a house. He inherited some swampland, didn't know what to do with it, so he starts digging down and he finds this limestone bedrock underneath, and he just starts building this house by making his own cement mixture of using the limestone, and then he gets stained glass
Yeah.
from Spain, and he crushes it into the stone. So it sparkles when you look at this place. And he's not an architect of renown. He never studied anything. And he starts building this dream home. He had a year to live. He'd come from New York. And he's like, well, I'm going to do this. And he couldn't get wood to build anything because it's the middle of Bartow and there wasn't, the phosphate mining and the turpentine mining was stealing all the lumber. So he got railroad ties. And he made that the support structure. So it's metal and then this cement mixture. And so he creates this thing called the Wonder House. It was originally called the Breeder House because he had put plants all around it. And so the rain would come down. He had hollowed all those railroad spikes through the cement and it could pour water all around the house. And so plants would grow everywhere. And it's a unique tourist attraction. He never actually lived there. Conrad Schuck was the name of the man who built this. He never lived there, but he worked on it. We were supposed to die in a year. He lived 72 years working on this house.
And he put things like the first version of air conditioning, which was running cool water through the walls and stuff like that. It's a totally bizarre, the fixtures that exist in this house.
It was open on all four sides, so you could open windows and just get a cross breeze no matter which way the wind was blowing. All this amazing stuff. Well, it sat abandoned for a long time after his family lost the land and he had passed away. And then another family bought it in the 70s and tried to renovate it 70s style. Not good. But thankfully, it is now in the hands of wonderful Prison Crease, and she is adorable. She's a mermaid at Wiki Wachi, and she bought this house, and she's restoring it to its glory. And then when she bought the house, she was very upset there were no ghosts. And she was like, oh, that was the whole point of buying, you're a goth kid, you want a ghost in your house. You buy this creepy old house that everybody says is haunted and there's no ghosts. What do you do?
If you look at a picture of this house online, it looks like something you'd see in The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah,
It's a creepy looking house. So,
However, now that she's been living there a while, she also has done the thing where she goes and collects artifacts and things that look creepy because she wants to make it a very Addams Family house. And some of the things they've bought have brought friends. And that's also stirred up stuff at the house. And she swears that she saw Conrad Schuck outside the house one day walking by. So that's why this one moved up on our list, because that's a recent sighting. And she's done all this research on the house, so she had pictures of them and she's done all this stuff so she knew what she was looking at. It's pretty crazy. Now you can do tours there. She is doing private tours. If you go to wonderhousebartow.com, you can schedule your tour. And she does Halloween, she does ghost tours. And they decorate beautifully all year.
and the holiday season.
And holiday season. And they are doing special for Sci-Fi Bartow. They're
Yeah.
going to be doing that too. So another fun travel.
Yes, travel.
All right.
Creepy houses.
My goodness. We're
So
moving
where's
right
number
along.
2? Because this is getting darker. Where's number 2, my friend?
Are we going to go dark?
Dark, super
Okay,
dark.
'cause number one-
Everybody wants to go super dark, right? You just, yeah.
Okay. All right. So number 2 is a friend of ours. He is the bestest boy. He used to be number 1 on the list,
Well,
and I feel bad. He's still number 1.
He's number 1. He's not number 2, but there's a part of his story that is number 2.
Yeah. So we are gonna have to ask permission to
Yes.
talk about this guy.
Yes.
So, Robert, is it okay if we talk about you? Some of you already know what we're about to talk about. So, yes, down in Key West, we have our bestest boy, Robert the Doll. How many people have visited Robert? Okay. How many people have had to write him a letter? Me.
There's some out there.
There's a couple, there's always a couple. They learn the hard way, right? We all learn the hard way. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Robert the Doll lives down in Key West. We'll talk about him real quick before we talk about the location. Robert the Doll is the most haunted doll in the world. You've heard of Annabelle, you've heard of all of this. You've heard of Chucky. Chucky was inspired because of Robert the Doll. The writer of Child's Play heard about this doll and created it. This doll lived in Key West for 100 years, still there. You can go visit him.
Regardless of what some ghost shows may tell you the location of this particular doll
He is not in a certain
West.
he is not in a certain museum in Vegas, despite what the show tells you.
Yeah.
But he is down in Key West, and you can go visit him. The easiest way to do that is go down to Fort Myers and take the ferry over to Key West. Enjoy yourselves. But Robert was the childhood doll of Robert Gene Otto, and weird stuff started happening when this doll showed up in the house, like almost immediately. Things were breaking, things were going wrong, and the mother is like, son, you've got to stop doing this. Robert, you have to stop. And he's like, well, I didn't do it. Robert did it. And they're like, you're Robert. And he's like, no, the doll wants to be called Robert. He wants my name. So I'm going to be Gene from now on, go by my middle name. And since we don't want any more for confusion. Nowadays we'd have given that kid some Ritalin and we wouldn't have these stories. But now, you know, this doll goes on to do all kinds of strange stories for over 100 years. Pretty amazing. If you want more of that, I did the Travel Channel's Shock Doc, Curse of Robert the Doll. It's available on Max and Amazon and fine streaming platforms everywhere. But what happened was, the doll is famous. He has rules. When you go visit Robert, you have to be nice to Robert. You can only say nice things. That's why we were very specific. You're not allowed to take his picture without permission, or bad things happen. All right? Third thing is you have to be polite, be courteous, introduce yourself, all the things you got to do. And then the fourth thing is say goodbye. You have to break that connection. And a lot of people skip one of these steps. And then if you do, you have to make it up to them. You have to write them an apology letter. And everything that happens from these people who've done this, what have we had? We've had car accidents.
There was a person who made an unauthorized movie about him, and they ended up in a huge financial trouble and then died of a very rare disease.
Yeah, in
out of
Germany.
nowhere.
Yeah,
There's also presidents. Like if you go down to the museum, you can see these letters, and there are letters from former presidents and stuff like that. All kinds of people have written him because people lose their, have car accidents, have things. What happened to you, Mark?
Well,
You didn't
obviously
get
we lost
permission.
audio when we started talking about Robert.
Yeah.
We just lost the recording. Sorry, Robert, we screwed up. But when I filmed the documentary on him, they made Stunt Robert for the reenactments, and it was made by the Jim Henson Company, which was pretty cool. They actually had a Muppeteer for Robert the Doll. I thought that was fantastic. But they introduced Stunt Robert to real Robert, and then they started filming Stunt Robert without doing any of the rules or anything. And I'm like, you guys have screwed up. And then sure enough, as soon as they did that, they started having all kinds of audio issues, started having other issues. And after I filmed it, I wasn't allowed to talk about it. I had an NDA, you're not allowed to talk about these things till they come out, all that. Both of my kids were in car accidents within a week of each other on other sides of the state. So I wrote Robert a letter. And you can go down to Key West and visit Robert in his museum, and you can read these hundreds of letters he gets every day. One of my favorites is, Dear Sir Robert, I'm going to call him Sir, I apologize for making fun of your leather face and calling it stupid. You are actually quite handsome, and leather is perfect for a face. Please remove your curse. We get the message. Please fix my eye my Xbox, and my marriage. I love you put them in that order, right? That's priorities. Now, the thing is, though, you can go visit Robert at the museum, but where we're adding our number 2 spot is the artist's house in Key West. This was Gene Otto's house, and this is where Robert the Doll lived for 150 years. And it is a bed and breakfast now that you can go stay in. And up in the turret room is where Robert used to sit and would look out at the windows at the people on the street for 100 years. People saw him as they'd go by this house, even though it was abandoned, but the doll still lived there. And they would see him walk around. So that's where the Chucky stories come from. But you can stay in that house. Now, when we were there filming, Cindy Kazaa, the amazing psychic, she was part of that team, and she was noting that the house seemed to have more ghosts than Robert attached to it. So we now kind of lean towards that maybe Robert the Doll absorbed some of the ghosts that were already there, and that there may be more ghosts in this house. So now paranormal teams are lining up to rent the turret room to see what they can find. So
In the artist house.
in the artist house. So definitely check it out. An amazing place to visit. So how are we doing for time?
We're
doing
good.
Pretty good.
We're
Pretty
good.
We still got a little bit more time. Good. Because the next place,
Is super dark. So this is gonna come with a little bit of a trigger warning,
yes.
because very, very terrible things happened at this location.
Now we've talked about some bad stuff already. So if you're ready, are we ready to talk about the most terrifying place in Florida?
Yes.
All right.
It is not St. Augustine, which is what
No, everybody's thinking.
Yeah.
It's not Amelia Island, which is pretty good. If you want pirate ghosts, go to Amelia Island. That's a good runner-up. Amelia Island's amazing. Also had the grave of a demon there, which is pretty cool. If anybody knows the story of Wickedemus, which is a great name for a demon. I don't know why that hasn't been on Good Omens or something. But anyway,
Well, where are we
that's
going?
another story. But we are going to the number 1, and I can say one word, and those who know it are going to be like, oh, this is the only thing that trumps Robert, I think, and that's saying something, because we love you, Robert.
Most handsome boy ever.
Yeah, are we ready?
Yeah.
Number 1, Dozier. Does anybody know that word?
Oh.
Way in the back.
Way in the back.
Those in the know. This is in Marianna, Florida, which is kind of straight up right where the Panhandle splits off. But if you go straight up North Florida. Now, the Dozier School for Boys, also called the Florida School for Boys for a long time. This place opened in 1901, and it was supposed to be for the worst of the worst terrible offenders of child crime. It's like kids who did terrible things to other kids, murder or worse, and by worse I mean
Well, what is worse than murder? But
sexual assault and then murder, or murder then sexual assault.
Adult type crimes.
Adult crimes, yes. They were supposed to be sent there. It was supposed to house 500 of the worst of the worst. It opened in 1901. By 1910, it had over 111 there. That was good. They were built for that. By 1915, they had over 1,000. Had not expanded the facility. By 1920, they had over 5,000 in facilities for 500.
Wow.
Yeah, that's when the allegations of kids killing each other, kids hurting each other, kids doing terrible things to each other begins.
And keep in mind, like so many of these horrible stories that come up, they weren't staffed for it. It was a government-run facility. And instead of being able to handle anything or go, hey, we need more people, they just kept bringing children. And the worst part was they weren't bringing the children they talked about, they were bringing in kids that did anything bad that they decided to send them to the school. It was not just simply the worst of the worst of the worst. They were there, but it was also just, oh, this kid did this bad thing, he's going to the Dozier school.
Yeah, and that was some of the things. There were, the kids were sent there for truancy, being late to school. Kids were sent there for incorrigibleness. So, yeah, what is that, right? And you're convicted to go to this place with some kid who murdered another kid, or 10 other kids. But what happened is very quickly, they start realizing that the abuse isn't just kid on kid. The staff is involved. The staff is doing things. Now, you'd think this would be investigated by the government after complaints. It was. 18 times. They finally closed it down. You know what year they closed it down? 2011.
Didn't they find all those bodies?
2011.
Let that settle in for a moment.
Didn't they find all those bodies that they couldn't?
That's where we're about to go to, yeah. So, 110 years this place is in business. The Senate finally closes it down for budget reasons.
Wow.
They go in. Now, we were writing about it because I'd heard all these ghost stories about the children who died. There was a famous fire there in the 1960s where 6 kids had died and 6 members of the faculty had died trying to save them. So, it's one of the big stories of the place. These heroic men went in to save the kids and all that. Terrible, terrible thing. There is a boot hill there, or was a boot hill there.
Yeah.
And they had 24 recorded deaths over that 111 years. Okay? The boot hill, when they closed it down and finally let people onto the property, there were 31 graves. Who were the other 7? That's the question. So Professor Kimberly from USF goes over there with ground penetrating radar. She finds 55 bodies. Who are all these kids? Why are there no records of this? Now, we've traveled all over the world going to haunted locations, and you can go to the oldest abbey in England and say, we're looking for the grave of such and such, such and such, buried in 1427. They'll be like, oh, row 6, lot 8. You go there to Dozier, we're like, who's buried in Boot Hill? We have no idea. They have
There's
no
no
idea.
records.
No records whatsoever. And then the records of the children there were spotty at best. And it's just terrifying that there were so many kids lost in this place, so many lost voices. And then the abuse cases finally started coming out. They started listening from the survivors of the school, talking about there was a guard that had a very long whip called Black Beauty. And they would take them to a room called the White House. And it was their solitary confinement wing. And it had these big industrial fans on it. Why would you put industrial fans on this one little 10 by 10 room? It was to drown out the sounds of what was going on in there. Some of those survivors, they have an organization called the White House Boys, and they are survivors, and they tell their tales of the things that happened here. Now, that was one of those places we went for the ghost stories and came back with something so much worse. And that happens at a lot of places, sadly. It's terrifying.
And that's part of, so when you go there, they're demolishing it.
It is being bulldozed now, and we're trying to save parts of it. They made the White House a historical building. They've sealed it to not allow anybody in. We're hoping it doesn't get accidentally bulldozed by the state. So there's big signs that everybody has to keep putting out there that's trying to restore it, saying, do not bulldoze historical site. Some of it is being done for good. One of the main buildings is being repurposed for adult schooling for adults with autism and stuff like that to get them help to be in society. But the reason it's so haunted, across the street is the church. This is where the boys found their solace. This was their one place they had of refuge. It's on public property. And people go, it's been abandoned for decades. When we went in there in 2012, a few years after the school had closed, there were still records just sitting in the church. people's personal records sitting in this church. And when you're in there, we're calling the state going, what are we, you need to destroy this stuff. This needs to be secured. This is HIPAA stuff. This is all this important stuff. And while we were there, we heard singing, like choir singing. And we realized the boys are still there. This is where they are. Now, there were reports of other boot hills on the property that were never found. The sheriff's department, where the original boot hill was, bulldozed that whole boot hill and put up their new sheriff's department headquarters. No one knows what happened to the bodies. They said they were seized by the state.
It is, if you go to that area, you can't necessarily go on the property, but if you go to that area, it is one of the heaviest things you will ever feel in your life.
Yeah.
You can feel the pain and the suffering and the death that existed in this place. So it is number one of the creepiest, horrible locations. And part of the reason we do the books that we do is because this history shouldn't be lost, and it should be changed in a way that makes it more politically correct. Because
Palatable
there's
to modern
some
audiences.
terrible things that have happened, and we need to learn from those things. But that, not to bring that down right there, but that is probably one of the scariest locations you can go to from that aspect, because there are so many souls still there.
Yeah. And now the team in that area is called Outcast Paranormal with a K. And they're an amazing team. They're documenting as much of the buildings as they can, as well as the history and as well as the ghosts, because it's all being torn down as they go. They opened up a pet kennel where the old headmaster's office was, Charles Dozier's office. And now the city of Marianna wants it gone. They don't want to pretend like it doesn't exist, that this never happened. So they kind of push it away and all that. So, but that, gang, that's our top 5. So we're gonna open it up for questions now. And does anybody have a ghost place they that they are curious about and where it ranks on the list? Or does anybody want to talk about any other haunted locations nearby? I can give you some more bonus ones if we want. So, question.
Not a particular place, but what is your favorite haunted location in Florida?
My favorite haunted location, I really love the May Stringer House, but that's because I have a personal preference. Right next to it's a place called Coney Island Hot Dogs. And Elvis stopped a movie so he could eat there. And it's still there. And I stopped a documentary to take a film team there to eat there. So, there's some other amazing places. I really like
Tampa Theater.
What's it?
Tampa Theater is my favorite.
is
There are
amazing.
several ghosts in the Tampa Theater.
Yeah, that one's got a lot of fun stories. One of my favorites also in the St. Pete area is the Vinoy. This is an amazing place because the cool thing about the Vinoy is it's right downtown St. Petersburg, and they've remodeled it. It was one of those big pink palaces that all the railroad barons built to bring tourists to Florida when it was all swampland and they had to justify their investment. But they built this Vinoy hotel, and because the Tampa Bay Rays had just become a baseball team, they would bring everybody to this hotel and put them up in the fancy hotels, the opposing team, and say, look how amazing our town is. Well, the Pittsburgh Pirates were haunted by ghosts in the Vinoy so much that they performed terribly, so they made it a bylaw in the MLB that no visiting team is allowed to stay in the Vinoy if they're playing the Tampa Bay Rays. So and not because of any reason except ghosts. So you know it's bad when you've got baseball side regulations. Yes?
I have a question. What would be your most traumatizing location?
Oh, well, Dozier by far.
Yeah.
Robert is pretty scary, but the one we had the funnest experience is actually out of Florida, and that would be the mushroom mines in Lawton, Kentucky. I had to take Erika there for fun.
No, it was not fun. It was not fun. Let me clarify, these mushroom mines were originally a limestone mine that went like 2 miles into the earth. And now they grew mushrooms in there and they carted them in, but you walk into this abandoned area that we're not recommending for legal reasons you do that, but hypothetically, if you
If you
walk
have
in there,
permission, go on
it is completely dark and instantly 5 feet in, it's 20 degrees colder than it was outside. But when I say completely dark, like no light, because there's not like, oh, we're outside, there's not really moon but stars. I'm talking like complete pitch dark. And there were people killed down in these mines because they've been abandoned, so homeless would go down there. And it was also a good place to bring a body because there was nobody there and there's miles of things. And they wanted to turn this into an entertainment venue. So if you guys can go imagine watching T Swift at the bottom of a mushroom mine, like that's what they were thinking of doing. And it's terrifying.
But it was fun. I was walking in and I'm like, yeah, Erika, here's where they found the 10 bodies. And she's like, we're out.
Yeah, that was like 100 feet in and I was like, are you sure this is a good idea? He's
And
like,
then while we're in there though, we hear tap, tap,
yeah.
tap, tap. And I'm like, drums in the deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very traumatizing. It was very terrifying. So.
Yeah, so that was terrifying.
Yeah, we got just a couple more minutes, so yes. Theme park hauntings are huge. You can pick up Freaky Florida, available at fine bookstores and Cracker Barrels everywhere, or at my booth, AA 643. Yeah, we talk about the hauntings at Universal and Disney in this book. Universal has what was fun. They built Diagon Alley, right? And they opened up the creepy bookstore there, and they brought in a lot of movie props. But to make it look really good, they also brought in things that just look creepy, including some real skulls and some implements of medical devices that might have been used in torture. And they're hanging up on the walls in this place. So now they have a Hat Man ghost, they have a smoke spirit, they've got a lot of things there. So if you want the most haunted place, that's pretty crazy. So, yeah.
So I got 2 questions for you. One, have you been to the Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana?
Of course. I actually filmed Return of Swamp Thing there. So.
And have you also been to Fort Pickens in Pensacola? I've actually had some pretty terrifying ones there.
Once again, I refer you to Freaky Florida, available at fine bookstores and Cracker Barrels everywhere. But I talk about Fort Pickens and Geronimo's ghost there, so, and amongst others. So, but, yes.
One that was close to where I grew up was the Devil Tree.
Devil's Tree, Casadega, oh no, Port St. Lucie.
And what book is that in?
That's in Freaky Florida. But the Devil's Chair in Casadega. Has anybody been to Casadega?
Yeah.
You're all here, so you should be. It's an hour from here. It was a town founded by psychics, and it's still owned. It still has more psychics and witches per capita than Salem. It's amazing. And they have the Devil's Chair there. But the Devil's Tree down in Port St. Lucie, you gotta love a ghost story that actually involves a real serial killer behind it.
Yep.
So, Gerard John Schaefer, if you ever research a thing and a man has 3 names on it in Florida, he's either A, a politician, or B, a serial killer, sometimes both.
We have to wrap
We
up.
gotta wrap up, gang. So, you can find us at EerieTravels.com.
We have some cards up here if you want to come grab
If you
them
haven't
from
got the
us
card,
quick.
come grab one.
We will be at booth AA.
A643, which is, just look for the artist alley, look for that row 600, we're along there somewhere.
And if you're here tomorrow, we're doing a family